Where do we find ourselves today? In the land of relative and complement clauses, just like we talked about last time. First stop, the relative clause. A relative clause is a kind of modifier that has its own subject and verb. Because it's a modifier, it always follows some other element of a sentence, usually a noun phrase. Let's take a look at how relative clauses are built. Here's a sentence with a subject, verb, and object. The owl caught the squid. Now, if we were to add a relative clause to the subject noun phrase, we would need another clause that also talks about the owl. Either one of these could work because the owl, our subject, shows up in both. So, to make a relative clause, we just take the noun phrase that appears in both our original and modifier clauses and swap it out for a relativizer, one of the following words: who, whose, whom, which, or that, depending on context. When you create a relative clause, the relativizer comes first, no matter which word, subject, or object it replaces in the relative clause. After we do that, we are free to put our newly minted relative clause into our original sentence. Of course, you can also modify the object of a sentence with a relative clause. And it's worth noting that many writers will leave out the relativizer in their writing, usually because they think it will make their sentences less wordy. Generally speaking, you can probably get away with it, as in the sentence, "The owl the mouse feared hooted." But in some cases, leaving out the relativizer can make a sentence much more confusing. Neither is wrong, grammatically speaking, but sometimes you can save your reader some confusion by leaving the relativizer in. Now, at first glance, a complement clause looks pretty similar to a relative clause, but it differs in some important ways. First, in a complement clause, the that doesn't replace a noun phrase, it just gets added on. See, a complement clause would make sense without that, while a relative clause wouldn't. Complement clauses also modify particular noun phrases, usually words like idea, thought, message, and so on. Generally, they give you more information by telling you what a thought, message, or idea was about. But even more interestingly, complement clauses don't only work as modifiers. Unlike relative clauses, they can also stand at the head of noun phrases, replacing nouns as subjects or objects of a sentence. So, for example, in the sentence, Mabel shouted that she was ready for the debate, that she was ready for the debate is the whole object of the verb. It is what Mabel shouted. Now, that wasn't so bad, was it? Relative and complement clauses can both modify noun phrases, but they do it in different ways. Because relative clauses replace the modified noun with a relativizer, they wouldn't make sense on their own. Complement clauses have a distinct subject and verb, and because of that, they can also stand on their own as noun phrases or modifiers depending on the context. Because, when it comes down to it, it really is all about context, which, if I do say so myself, is a pretty great segue to modifiers that modify whole sentences.